For months, she turned his mailbox into her personal playground of destruction. But one night, the game ended in a way no one saw coming. For months, she shattered his mailbox like it was some twisted personal challenge, until one night changed everything. Darius Whitmore never gave much thought to that ordinary black metal box at the edge of his driveway. It was just like every other mailbox on Sycamore Lane in Dayton, Ohio. But that changed the morning he stepped outside, coffee in hand, and found the door swinging open, barely clinging to its hinges. The previous night's mail was scattered across the dewy grass, some pages soaked, others crumpled. Maybe it was just the wind? Maybe a careless paperboy? He brushed it off, gathered the soggy letters, and made a mental note to tighten the screws. But 2 days later, it happened again. Only this time, the mailbox was bent at an odd angle, like someone had taken a swing at it. Darius sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Probably just some bored teenagers looking for cheap thrills. Annoying, sure, but not a real problem. He straightened the post and went on with his day. Until it happened again. And again. And again. Each time, the damage worsened. The door ripped off, the post nearly uprooted. And then came the final straw. Darius stepped outside to take out the trash, only to stop cold. His mailbox lay in the gutter, shattered into jagged pieces, like someone had gone at it with a sledgehammer. This wasn't random. Someone was doing this on purpose. He took a deep breath, forcing down the frustration bubbling inside him. It was just a mailbox. He had better things to do than play detective over some bent metal. But when he went to the hardware store to grab a replacement, the guy behind the counter raised an eyebrow. "Another one?" the man asked, already pulling a new box from the shelf. Darius let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Yeah, been having some bad luck, I guess." The guy grunted. "Bad luck? Or someone got a problem with you?" Darius didn't answer. Didn't want to. He paid in cash, drove home in silence, and installed the new mailbox with extra care. Fresh screws, double-check stability. But as he tightened the last bolt, something gnawed at him. It wasn't just the mailbox. There had been signs. The glares from across the street when he first moved in. The wrong mail, bills always missing, junk always showing up. The neighborhood association letters about keeping the community's aesthetic intact, always sent to him. Darius wasn't stupid. He'd seen this before. But he wasn't here to start trouble. He worked hard. Paid his mortgage. Minded his own business. That should have been enough. It wasn't. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, he made a decision. If it happened again, just one more time, he was going to find out exactly who was behind it. And something told him he wouldn't have to wait long. He didn't. 2 nights later, a dull metallic clang echoed through the quiet street. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct. A sound that made his stomach tighten before his brain even caught up. Darius sat up, heart pounding. He didn't need to guess. He already knew. But this time, instead of rushing outside, he reached for his phone. A few days earlier, he had installed a small, motion-activated security camera on his porch, angled just right to capture the mailbox. He hadn't told anyone. Had barely even admitted to himself that he was serious about it. But now, as he tapped the screen, the answer stared back at him. Karen Ledford. His next-door neighbor. The woman who had lived there for over a decade. The same woman who had barely spoken to him in the years since he moved in, except for that one time when she'd sneered, "Some of us care about keeping the neighborhood nice." And there she was, standing in the glow of a nearby street lamp, gripping a wooden baseball bat with both hands. His mailbox was already dented. She must have struck it once before he started watching. Now, she adjusted her stance, lining up another swing. Darius could hardly believe it. This wasn't kids being stupid. This wasn't some prank. This was deliberate. She swung again. A sharp, brutal crack. The mailbox wobbled on its post. Another hit. The door snapped off completely, landing in the grass. And then, she exhaled. Almost satisfied, Karen took one last swing before lowering the bat and strolling back toward her house. Calm, casual, like she had just taken out the trash. Darius sat frozen, gripping his phone so tightly his fingers ached. A sharp, burning anger flared in his chest, but he forced himself to breathe. Think. Reacting out of anger wouldn't help. He needed to be smart. The next morning, he said nothing. Just waited. Sure enough, around noon, Karen strolled down her driveway to check her mail. She didn't even glance at him. But Darius knew she was waiting for a reaction. Wanted him to explode, to march over, yell, cause a scene. Something that would let her paint him as the aggressive neighbor. Instead, he gave her nothing. She reached into her mailbox, pulled out a few envelopes, and turned to head back inside. That's when Darius spoke. His voice was calm. Too calm. Sharp enough to cut. Got some good swings in last night, huh? Karen froze mid-step. Just for a second. Then, slowly, she turned, forcing a fake laugh. Excuse me. Darius didn't answer. He just held up his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward her. The footage played in perfect clarity. Her. The bat. The destruction. The casual walk home. Karen's expression changed fast. Her fake smile twitched. For the first time since he moved in, she actually looked rattled. But she recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders, tilting her chin up. That's not me, she said flatly. Darius let out a low, disbelieving chuckle. You sure? Because it looks a lot like you. Her nostrils flared. You're harassing me. You're destroying my property, Darius shot back, patience thinning. And you've been doing it for months. She crossed her arms, lips pressing into a tight line. Prove it. Darius didn't blink. Already did. The words hung between them. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. She wasn't used to being cornered. She liked control. But she didn't have any now. Without another word, she turned sharply on her heel and stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. Darius exhaled slowly, watching her retreat. He had the footage. He had the proof. But something told him this wasn't over. He just didn't realize how much worse it was about to get. Darius had hoped catching Karen on camera would be enough. That maybe, just maybe, she'd feel a shred of embarrassment. Maybe even fear at being exposed. But people like her don't back down that easily. The first sign of escalation came the very next morning. Darius stepped outside, and stopped cold. At the base of his freshly replaced mailbox sat a pile of garbage. Not just a few stray scraps. Actual, stinking, rotting trash. Maybe, just maybe, an animal had gotten into someone's trash bin. But no. The way the bags were ripped open, the way the contents were carefully scattered across his yard but nowhere else. It was deliberate. Darius looked up, eyes narrowing toward Karen's house. Her curtains shifted, just slightly, but he saw it. She was watching. All right. So that's how she wanted to play. He exhaled slowly, turned around, and grabbed a pair of gloves. He didn't yell. Didn't react. Just calmly picked up every piece of trash and threw it away. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing him lose his temper. But that was just the beginning. That night, as Darius sat on his porch, enjoying a rare moment of cool air, a loud screech shattered the quiet. His head snapped toward the street, just in time to see a white SUV peeling away. His mailbox? Flattened. Darius's fingers curled around the armrest of his chair. Now she was using her car. Heat rose in his chest, that old familiar anger clawing its way up. But he forced himself to stay still. To breathe. She wanted a reaction. So he didn't give her one. Instead, he went inside, pulled up the security footage, and saved everything. The garbage. The SUV. The repeated destruction. He labeled each file, dated them, and made sure Karen's face was crystal clear in the earlier videos. Then, he made a decision. If she wanted to play dirty, fine. She was about to find out he wasn't an easy target. The next morning, Darius drove straight to a metalwork shop on the other side of town. He spent nearly an hour with the owner, explaining exactly what he needed. By the end of the conversation, He had ordered something that would make sure Karen never touched his mailbox again. A reinforced steel mailbox. Not just any mailbox, one designed to withstand abuse. The kind built for rural backroads where reckless teenagers tried, and failed, to knock them over. Thick, heavy, secured into the ground with concrete. But that wasn't all. Darius had one more request. A low-voltage deterrent. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that could seriously hurt someone, but strong enough to deliver a nasty shock to anyone dumb enough to take a swing at it. The guy at the shop had laughed. "Man, that's some next-level pettiness," he said, shaking his head. "But I like it. She won't see it coming." Darius smirked. "That's the point." 2 days later, the mailbox stood tall, an unmovable monument embedded in concrete. Darius took a step back, arms crossed, admiring his work. Let's see what she tries now. And he wouldn't have to wait long. That same night, at 11:45 p.m., his phone buzzed. Motion alert. Darius was already awake, waiting. Something told him Karen wasn't going to let this go. He tapped the notification, the live feed loading instantly. And there she was. Karen Ledford, standing in front of his brand-new, steel-reinforced mailbox, bat in hand. Darius almost laughed. She didn't hesitate. The second she stepped onto the curb, she raised the bat, stance wide, grip tight. She was going to destroy it again. Except this time, she had no idea what was coming. Darius leaned forward, watching closely. The first swing connected, hard. He saw the force ripple through her arms as the bat struck steel. But instead of bending like before, the mailbox barely made a sound. The shock on Karen's face was immediate. She adjusted her grip and swung again. Crack. The impact jolted up her arms. But the mailbox didn't even budge. Karen stepped back, breathing heavy, frustration clear on her face. Darius smirked. "Oh, you're mad now." He kept watching. He knew she wasn't done. He could see it in the way she squared her shoulders. How she refused to accept defeat. She stepped forward, gripping the bat tighter, like a weapon, then swung with everything she had. The second metal met metal. A sharp, bright spark flashed. Karen screamed. Her entire body jerked backward as the low-voltage shock hit her. The bat flew from her hands, clattering onto the pavement. She stumbled, arms flailing, then hit the ground. Hard. For a moment, she just sat there, breathing fast, hands shaking. She looked stunned, disoriented, like she couldn't figure out what had just happened. Then, rage. Karen scrambled to her feet, stumbling slightly, and turned toward the mailbox like it had personally insulted her. Karen's fists clenched. Her face twisted in fury. Darius could barely hold in his laughter. Oh, now she was really mad. She opened her mouth, probably to curse, scream, or let out whatever nonsense was swirling in her head. But then she saw it. The red blinking light. The security camera. Her entire body went still. Darius could see it, the exact moment the realization hit her. She had been caught. Recorded. For the first time, Karen Ledford looked afraid. She spun around quickly, glancing toward the street, probably hoping no one else had seen her. And then, without a single word, she turned and ran. Darius watched her disappear into her house, slamming the door behind her. He sat back, exhaled slowly, and then he laughed, a deep, satisfied laugh that rumbled in his chest. Checkmate. But he wasn't done yet. Reaching for his phone, he replayed the footage, every single second of it. The attack. The shock. The fall. The sheer panic in her eyes. Then, with a smirk, he hit save. Karen had spent months trying to tear him down. Trying to intimidate him. Trying to push him out. But tonight? Tonight, she got exactly what she deserved. And by morning, the entire neighborhood was going to know about it. Morning came, and before Darius even stepped outside, he could feel it. The whole street was buzzing. Through his window, he heard hushed voices. The occasional burst of laughter. That unmistakable tension when something big had happened. By the time he opened his front door, a small group had already gathered near his mailbox. A few neighbors were staring at the scene, more specifically, at the mailbox. Or rather, at the lack of damage. "Damn thing looks brand new," muttered Mr. Hargrove, the old man from 2 houses down, scratching his head. "Didn't even dent." Darius smirked. "Wasn't supposed to." He barely finished speaking when his eyes landed on her. Karen. She stood stiffly in her yard, arms crossed, her face pale. She wasn't looking at him. Wasn't looking at anyone. Instead, she stared at the sidewalk like she wanted to sink into it. Darius almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then his phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor, Camille. "Oh my God. Did you see next door?" Darius frowned, tapped the notification, and there it was. Someone had uploaded the footage. And it wasn't him. His finger hovered over the play button, but he didn't even need to press it. The comments told him everything he needed to know. "She's been doing this for months. LMAO. I can't stop watching her hit the ground." So she's been harassing him this whole time, and then tried to act like she was the victim? Unreal. This is embarrassing, honestly. The HOA needs to do something about her. Karen Ledford's dirty laundry was completely aired out, and she knew it. Darius glanced toward her yard just in time to see her storm back into her house, slamming the door so hard the windows shook. A few people chuckled. "Guess she didn't expect to go viral," someone muttered. But the amusement didn't last long. Because minutes later, the police showed up. A patrol car rolled onto the street, stopping right in front of Karen's driveway. 2 officers stepped out, one of them holding a clipboard. They didn't even need to knock. Karen must have been watching, because she yanked the door open before they even reached the porch. Darius couldn't hear the conversation, but he didn't have to. The body language said it all. Karen's arms flailed. The officers remained calm but firm. One of them pointed toward his house, toward his mailbox. That's when Karen's face crumpled. Darius knew exactly what was happening. They were telling her what she already knew. The destruction of property. The repeated harassment. The fact that she was caught on camera. She was in real trouble now. And for the first time in months, Darius finally felt at peace. But just before he turned to go inside, he noticed something, a woman, one of the newer neighbors, staring at him. Not in a bad way, but almost regretful. Then, after a moment, she walked over. "Hey," she said quietly. "I just wanted to say, I had no idea she was doing all that." Darius nodded, not sure where she was going with this. She sighed. "I should have said something earlier. I noticed the mail thing, and the trash. But I didn't want to get involved." He looked at her for a long moment, then shrugged. "You see it now." She swallowed hard. "Yeah, I do." Darius let that hang in the air for a second. Then, before she could say anything else, he simply said, "Better late than never." And he meant it. Because today, Karen wasn't just exposed. She was finally being held accountable. And that was justice enough. Karen Ledford's fall from grace was faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, she was the talk of the neighborhood. It wasn't just the security footage, though that certainly didn't help. It was the police report. The HOA complaints. The realization that she had been harassing Darius for months. People who once waved at her now avoided eye contact. Some even crossed the street when they saw her coming. And Karen. She had never looked more miserable. She barely left the house. When she did, it was quick and careful. No more smug glances. No more passive-aggressive remarks. Just a woman who knew she had lost. Darius didn't go out of his way to rub it in. He didn't have to. The neighborhood had already done that for him. But there was one last moment of reckoning. It happened late one afternoon, just as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. Darius was out watering his lawn when he heard footsteps approaching. He turned. And there she was, Karen. She looked different. Not angry, not smug, just defeated. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a voice so low he almost didn't hear it, she muttered, "I didn't mean for it to get this bad." Darius just stared at her. She shifted on her feet. She stopped, exhaled sharply. "I was just—" She couldn't finish, because she knew. There was no excuse, no justification, no version of this where she wasn't the problem. Darius let the silence stretch for a moment before finally speaking. "Yeah, you did." Karen swallowed hard. "Well, She waved a hand vaguely, like she wanted to say more. But she didn't. She just turned and walked away. That was the last real conversation they ever had. A few weeks later, her house went up for sale. Darius didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He just watched from his porch as Karen Ledford packed up her life and drove away. And when the moving truck finally disappeared down the street, he let out a breath he hadn't even realized he was holding. Not because he won, but because he finally got his peace back. Some people think they can get away with anything, that their actions have no consequences, that they can bully, destroy, and manipulate without ever facing the fallout. But sooner or later, the truth catches up. Karen thought she was untouchable. She wasn't. And when karma finally came knocking, she had no choice but to answer. Let this be a reminder. Hatred, harassment, cruelty always have a price. And when the bill comes due, it's never pretty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share.